Hi, Achim here, InnerSpace Explorers. Today I want to get back on the topic of helium content because after the last video there were quite a few people messaging and the question came up that on one side I said that I use a lot of helium in my mixtures, and at a certain depth I actually use heliox instead of trimix, and then a lot of people asked if I do this for the work of breathing. And at the same time, they were asking if I do not feel that this leads to unnecessary long decompression. So, in case you haven't seen the last video, I'll put a link here in the description because it's probably good to see that before you watch this. So work of breathing is a huge topic, especially in my opinion when you dive a rebreather, and we talked about this before. Open circuit trimix diving is kind of dead, and I actually can't remember when I did an open circuit trimix dive for the last time. It's years since. And even for bailout, I rarely use open circuit trimix tanks, just also for the cost. I mean, if you do a deeper dive and you do the bailout calculation the way I do it, and there's another video where I'm actually talking in detail about this, I'll put a link here as well, then that would still be huge amounts of money, and basically for gas that just sits there because normally you don't use it, right? So for my deep stuff, I usually use a second rebreather. So the work of breathing is a huge issue because overbreathing a regulator is almost impossible. And overbreathing a regulator, on the other hand, means there's still fresh gas coming. So overbreathing a rebreather is way easier because the thing does not deliver gas by itself. So for those of you who are not that much into rebreather diving or technical diving or whatever, on a regulator you theoretically overcome a small resistance. In a modern regulator, that resistance is nothing that you feel at all, and then the valve opens up and it actually pushes gas towards you. So breathing from a regulator is kind of supported breathing, I would call it. And obviously you exhale in the water. When you inhale, there's fresh gas coming. So even if you breathe really, really, really hard, you will normally not get to a point where you have a feeling like I'm not getting enough gas. Plus the gas that you get is always fresh, so there is no CO2 issues. So if you're breathing super hard on a rebreather, the work of breathing can become an issue. So you're breathing like I'm sitting here, I'm breathing from the volume around me. Same goes for the rebreather, which means my lungs have to suck in that gas kind of actively. And all of you who ever did a rebreather dive know exactly what I'm talking about. So somebody going on a rebreather for the first time, a lot of times people are like, this doesn't breathe good. I have the feeling that I do not get enough gas because it's so different than open circuit. And so obviously when you start working harder and harder and you breathe a lot and you breathe fast, there is a chance, first of all, that you breathe a lot of gas through the machine, you push it through, and you get what we call a CO2 breakthrough. So you get a higher CO2 buildup, which then leads to you breathing even harder and the feeling that I'm not getting enough gas, because as you know, CO2 triggers our breathing. It's not the lack of oxygen, it's the too much CO2. And as you do not exhale into the water but back in the machine, you're not getting rid of that CO2, so you get that buildup. And so overbreathing a rebreather because of a heavy workload of breathing is a real issue. And especially the deeper you go, the more dense the gas becomes. and that means I want the best breathing experience possible the deeper I go. And obviously the more helium I have in my mix, the easier it becomes to breathe. And that's one of the reasons why I use a high helium content in my mixtures. The other thing is I want to be super clear. So we always say the maximum narcosis depth that we tolerate in our diving is around 30 meters. Fact is, at 30 meters on air, there is a certain amount of narcosis. And if you dive a lot, and if you dive a lot in different environments, you will most probably at some point experience some sort of narcosis. That does not mean that you're not functioning anymore. I mean, people drive home with 3 beers and they are perfectly okay, or let me put it another way, they are perfectly fine operating that car, unless there's something out of the normal. So that child's suddenly running in front of the car, or there's another scenario in traffic that requires a super fast reaction, and that's probably when then the alcohol comes into play. And same goes for the narcosis. As long as you're just swimming around, breathing in, breathing out, you probably don't feel that. But fact is, you have a limited field of view, your reaction time becomes slower, and while at 30 meters swimming along a reef or a wreck and looking around, this may be fine, you do not want to experience that in 100 meters, 120 meters, 140 meters, whatever, where every little mistake is critical. So the deeper I go, the less narcosis I want to have. And that's why at a certain point I eliminate the nitrogen at all. Another question that came up was if I am not afraid of HPNS. To be honest, I never experienced it, even in my professional career. I know that there's people that had issues with that in the 150 to 200 meter range. I can't tell you anything about it. I never had it. So I know about it. There is a different feeling when you do a fast descent on Helix compared to trimix. And I always have the feeling, and if that's something that you experienced, please put it in a comment. I would be super curious to hear about it. Because when I'm descending on Helix and I'm doing it fast, like on a scooter, I always have the feeling that every feeling is intensified. So the way I experience colors, I experience sound, I experience taste, even the sensitivity of, for example, my hands, holding a scooter or pressing a button, everything feels like 110%. I don't know how to describe it in a different way, but it's kind of weird. Not in a bad way, but it's a sensation that I have every single time I do this, and it always makes me like, oh, that's interesting. A friend of mine was like, that sounds like you're on speed. I have no experience with that, so I can't say that. But yeah, so that's the only effect I ever noticed. So I never had this trembling or twitching or whatever you read as symptoms of HPNS. So the last thing was the penalty in decompression time. And this is totally unscientific, and I can already hear all the haters and all the people that know better. So I'm a dinosaur, and when I started my technical diving career, so late 80s, early 90s, and I did my first trimix dives, and I started to experiment with helium, the people that I learned from told me a very simple thing. They said, look, this helium is traveling into your tissues by a factor of about 2.6, so 2.6 times faster than nitrogen. but it also leaves the body at that rate. So it doesn't matter. So yeah, you saturate your tissues faster, but you also desaturate them at the same rate. So there's no disadvantage. Fact is, a certain volume filled with helium holds less molecules than the same volume filled with nitrogen. So in the end, there's less gas that you have to get rid from. That's why you actually decompress better from helium. So again, this was like my initial introduction to that gas. And that's how I started diving it, and that's how I started to think about decompression. To be totally honest, and please don't do this at home, don't try this, and don't blame me if you do and get bent. So I'm just telling you the way I approached it in the early 80s, in the late 80s, in the early 90s. And back then I had no access to real like trimix decompression tables, whatever. There were no computers that you're like, oh, okay, I'm diving 1845, let's see what happens. So what I basically did back then was I used to use Navy tables, Bühlmann tables, whatever I could get a hold on, and then more or less by feel adjusted. So added safety, started to build curves, decompressing with nitrox, decompressing with oxygen, and kind of figuring it out. Fact is, I was super young, I was super fit, I never got really bent. I had dives where I'm like, that doesn't feel too good, but I never had a real issue. So always super slow ascents, and that's how I kind of made my way into this type of diving. Obviously later on, when information was available and I mean you're growing with what you're doing, the way of planning decompression became different and more, how should I say, and the way of planning my decompression became more formal and more structured. I still never had the feeling that the helium was a disadvantage. I always felt that's a great advantage. So I felt a lot worse after dives with no helium or only little amounts of helium than after dives with a lot of helium. So I definitely do not consider it a problem in decompression. We all know it is not. I mean, otherwise we would not have had this discussion that the last video was based on, where people were like, oh, these guys actually eliminate the helium content in the gas that they put in their computer to basically save a little bit on decompression, because the computer would give them a longer decompression time based on the helium content, so they take it out so they can have shorter deco. And if that would mean that they get bent, they would not do it. So obviously the benefit is there. But the classical computer program is actually telling you have to decompress longer because of the higher helium content. So I know that's a little bit up and down in this video. So I still hope that makes sense, and especially it answers the questions. Again, I'm super curious to hear if there's somebody watching this video who had an HPNS experience. I would love to talk about that and hear about it. And yeah, if you have questions, comments, feedback, whatever, put it in the comment section. If you have recommendations for videos, drop me a message or put it in the comment section as well. If you like my content, please hit the like button and subscribe to my channel. And I'll see you in the next video, which I will actually do tonight, because we will test the submarine today. So I'm actually sitting in my workshop waiting for Christian. So when he comes, we'll do one more maintenance circle basically, because the submarine was in Austria. A few small things that broke when people were climbing in and out, and we figured there were two small things that we didn't like, but we couldn't put it in the lake because of the ice on it. And today we're in an indoor facility. I can't tell you exactly where, but there will be a video tonight for the final test. And if you don't see me ever again on video, then this test obviously was not good. See you in the next video. Bye-bye.